Welcome to Distance Learning, brought to you by the Palm Beach County School District Office of African, African American, Latino, Holocaust, and Gender Studies. Today's lesson is about the Black Power movement. For this lesson, you will need to access the African American History lesson plans located on the School District of Palm Beach County Google Curriculum site. Within the lesson plans, you will find the materials that correspond to this lesson. If you joined us last week, I talked about the modern civil rights movement and its role in transforming the legal and social status of African Americans, the role of students, methods of protest, and the challenges of the civil rights movement. During this lesson, we will examine the role of Black nationalism during the civil rights movement. Let's begin by activating your thinking. Why do you think the Black Power movement became more appealing to more Black people? Do you think the nonviolent strategies of the civil rights movement were effective? Take a moment to reflect. Setting the stage. In 1967, the civil rights movement shifted from protest against segregation, disenfranchisement, and discrimination to Black mobilization. Black people lost patience with the slow pace of racial change. Despite new legislation, Blacks continued to deal with racism, discrimination, as well as economic and political oppression, and an increase in racial violence against Blacks. As the civil rights movement weakened, Black Americans turned to Black nationalism. Black nationalism promotes unity, self-determination, pride, social, political, economic empowerment within Black communities. Black nationalism birthed the Black Power movement, a revolutionary movement built upon these principles. The symbol of the movement is the raised fist, which stands for unity and solidarity. The term Black nationalism should sound familiar to you. Which Black leader was a proponent of Black nationalism and the Pan-African movement, who also inspired the Nation of Islam and the Rastafarian movement? If you guessed Marcus Garvey, you are correct. It is important to understand that the roots of Black nationalism were planted before what we know as the modern civil rights movement. An important figure of the Black Power movement is Malcolm X. Malcolm X was born Malcolm Little in Omaha, Nebraska. His mother was from Grenada. His father was a Baptist preacher who joined Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association after moving to Michigan. After his father was murdered by white supremacists, his mother was committed to a mental institution. Malcolm dropped out of school and went to live with his sister in Boston, Massachusetts, where he resorted to a life of crime. He was arrested for burglary in Boston and sentenced to 10 years in prison. There, he educated himself. He studied and embraced the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, leader of the Nation of Islam. He dropped his last name Little and called himself Malcolm X. Malcolm X rejected the ideology of nonviolence and racial integration. He spoke out against capitalism, white supremacy, and advocated for self-defense. Malcolm's popularity created tensions between him and the Nation of Islam. He also didn't agree with some of the actions of Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm broke away from the Nation of Islam and founded his own organization. After returning from a pilgrimage in Mecca, he changed his name to El-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz. He continued to lecture and speak until he was assassinated on February 14, 1965. You will learn more about Malcolm X in your lesson for this week. Stokely Carmichael was a civil rights leader. He was born in Trinidad. He grew up in New York and later attended Howard University. Stokely Carmichael joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1960. Some of the members of SNCC were unhappy with the progress of the modern civil rights movement. In 1965, Stokely Carmichael replaced John Lewis as the chairman of SNCC. He moved SNCC towards a stronger embrace of Black nationalism. Stokely Carmichael popularized the slogan, Black Power. It became SNCC's rallying cry. Carmichael believed that African Americans should have their own political party. Therefore, he created the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. The Black Panther was the party's logo. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was created by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale in Oakland, California. The name of the party was taken from the Black Party symbol of the Lowndes County Freedom Organization created by Stokely Carmichael. The organization dropped the self-defense from its name in 1968. The Black Panthers protected Black people from police brutality and spoke against capitalism and racism. The founding document of the Black Panther Party was a 10-point program in which they outlined the major issues Blacks faced, demands, and the party's goals. The Black Panther Party conducted armed patrol to monitor police. They also engaged in community service work, such as breakfast programs, medical clinics, and after-school programs. The Black Panthers fed thousands of children per day. Their breakfast program was so successful, the federal government adopted it. They also launched drug education programs. They were a revolutionary organization who adopted the slogan, "Power to the People." By 1970, the Black Panther Party had over 30 national chapters in major cities throughout the United States. COINTELPRO was a counterintelligence program initiated by J. Edgar Hoover. The purpose of the program was to disrupt the Black Panther Party as well as other organizations. J. Edgar Hoover also practiced similar tactics on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Although the party had its issues, the program is responsible for much of the violence and mayhem associated with the party. It also shaped the public's negative opinion about the Black Panthers. In efforts to destroy the party, law enforcement officials killed an estimated 28 Black Panthers and imprisoned 750 at least. In this lesson, you will read about Fred Hampton, a young revolutionary and member of the Black Panther Party who was murdered during this time. In conclusion, the civil rights movement didn't start with Brown v. Board of Education in 1954 and abruptly end in 1965. Black people continued to fight against racism, discrimination, and inequality. There were roots of the Black Power movement prior to the modern civil rights movement, and within the movement itself. The Black Power movement would continue to influence other organizations within the prolonged fight for civil rights. This concludes this week's lesson on Black Power and the Black Power movement. As you reflect on today's lesson, think of 3 things you've learned, 2 things you would like to learn more about, and 1 question you still have. Thank you for listening.